Good morning, everyone. It's great to see women in our panel. And what a pleasure to have someone who would represent the Arab sector and not to only talk about the Arab sector, and somebody who would try to represent the ultra-Orthodox without speaking above their head. And we are not coming from the same places, and still we're going to try to run this discourse around high-tech near it to understand what role every part of this triangle that is called third sector, government, state, and the employers who care about one thing only, as we know. Barak, CEO of Google Israel, perhaps you will start by, first of all, telling us what you do. What is your vision? Where do you want to bring your ship? Of course, you said what a pleasure to see women in this panel. You know, we're already talking about diversification. We saw the previous panel. There was a lot of, you know what, I'm not saying what, but there was a lot of it there. So I do hope that this panel would have a lot of, but something else, something different. So the idea of diversification, and I prepared two aids to illustrate this. Let's take a slide back before we talk about our vision, and let's understand where we are in this country. There were things that were said in the previous panel that I disagreed with, but I would like to focus more here. I think that there is a consensus and understanding shared by everyone that high-tech is the locomotive of the Israeli economy and has been so in the past 20 years at least. And the data is amazing. Over 50% of the export of the state of Israel is related to the Israeli high-tech, and we don't have 50% of the manpower working in high-tech. So that's a multiplier that is hard to grasp. And think about our return and its impact on the personal tax, the corporate tax that we pay, and we get to nearly 35% of the taxes in Israel coming from this segment. This whole story is amazing because only 11%, and I'm very generous in that, because the number is more like 10% work in high-tech. So if we take 100% of the Israeli economy and the labor force, only 1 out of every 10 people works in high-tech. And just think about its multiplier and what it creates. And then we look at the demography. And we know what the demographic data of the state of Israel looks like. But we look at that demography of high-tech and we understand that it's a very, very masculine environment. And that's the main resources that has fueled Israeli high-tech in the past 20 to 30 years. And this community has grown bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. And when we look at the representation of the ultra-Orthodox women, Arab, in the Israeli high-tech, we see a totally different story from the Israeli demography. Eldad Tamir said something earlier, and I didn't like, it was very discordant to me. Take, for example, alumni of the Technion who are Arabs, and I challenged them on the stage in a conference we held, and we're perhaps intimidating you, but there are more. There are 20% of the graduates in the Technion are Arabs, but we don't have 20% of the job applications coming from Arabs. What else do you need to do? So it takes two to tango here too. We, as Google, look at our place in Israeli high-tech and we understand that we have something very singular. We meet with entrepreneurs in high-tech in different stages. It can be an Israeli entrepreneur, and I look at Eden, who used to be an entrepreneur, but now is a person empowering entrepreneurs. It starts with a dream, and then it goes to the construction stage, and then the growth stage, and if they succeed, they manage to go global and then to maintain that further. We are thinking how to take this equation by which we can impact high-tech employees along this whole line. A year ago, we hosted Ms. Ruth Porat, the CFO of Google, and we gave sort of a showcase of the Israeli challenges. And at that time, a year ago, and that was before the inflation broke out and the crises resulting from the war in the Ukraine, we saw that there were some 300,000 employees in the Israeli high-tech, and we have to actually grow its power and impact by creating 150,000 jobs over the next 5 years. And that makes everyone think, how can we do that? And we are extremely delighted to see that in the framework of this journey that we had her meet entrepreneurs and funds and venture capitals and the government in the third sector, that we do have the ability of actually igniting something big. We made Google Alphabet announce and invest $25 million over the course of 5 years, and in order to make that economic social impact. And in this slide, we describe exactly how we're going to do it, and I'll do this very briefly.
So how do we create inspiration among young people, especially without taking anything? And I am a father of 2 daughters and a son, and I want to focus on my daughters. How do I cause more women to think about the sciences, to take the direction of mathematics and not be scared? And not to be scared to, again, to dream about being a program, a software developer, So we started with a program. We launched a program with the third sector, with the Ministry of Labor, low-tech, that is going to create a huge change in schools in Israel to create more interest. You can call it momentum, especially among, again, the geographical periphery, social periphery, if you want to call it such, especially focusing on women. Now, this is symbolic. I know that later on the panel, Professor Reichman will join us. But after that, a big part of our program, and that is the latest stage. Okay, so that was a dream, right? I first impact you during the dream stage, and I want to move you forward to that building stage. We established a school here at the Reichman University. I said it was symbolic, and we called it, it's a tech school. We called it Tech School, a collaboration of Google and Reichman, where we hold training sessions, especially for, again, populations that are underrepresented. So, again, let's say we weren't talking about your 2 daughters, but let's say it were my 2 daughters. So that's a school, right? Yes. It has a special selection program, which is very fair, based on the methodology of the Reichman University. Again, we've also recruited some other high-tech company to this, and a few, again, civil society bodies. I think that within 2-3 years, the school will be able to have so many relevant graduates, alumni, every single year. Every company will say they were successful. Wildman, myself, we were able to do pilot programs with ultra-Orthodox and the Arab sector. They never had this critical mass. If we don't do this, there won't be a critical mass. And the final stage, and this connects to what I said to my call a few years ago in the employment conference for the Arab sector, is how do I give that stage to the juniors? Because in Israel, we have a huge problem where people with no networks and with no connection, no experience, they can never get this opportunity. And not long ago, we launched an NGO, and we are one of the launchers. And we launched a Place Ayel. Again, that's the name of the NGO. We also have something else called Start in Google. Call it maybe, again, this empowerment program for juniors, especially from the geographical and social periphery, with the understanding that this sector, the next talents will come. Yes, empower them, and they will turn into talents. That's what I said. If we have to create, again, 150,000, new positions, we finished that. We finished that resources. That's called the male Jew. Ashkenazi male Jew. Again, I'm not saying that. I've already used up that resource. Okay. We can't get to that critical mass that is needed. That is why it's called doubled impact, because the motivation is economical. That's great, but the minute it's a social impact or social motivation, wow, that's amazing. The minute these two connect, there's so much power there. Okay, so after you have presented it in this fashion of that, trying to, again, give tools to a child and then advance him in the right track, or her, right? Growing up into this environment until the skills are implemented by a specific employer sounds fantastic, but it won't work without the state and without the other side, meaning the periphery, different third sectors call it such, to say, if one they come and say, I'm willing to join you. So in this discussion, if we move forward and look into the future, let's say 2028, for example, and if we, see this process, process and all the different processes of Israeli society and in the world of high tech as well. And, Tair, again, Director General of the Ministry of Labor and Welfare. So, Tair Ifergan. Again, I think that maybe you reached your peak, your Ministry of Labor, right? Or that figure that you set as a goal in terms of investment and in terms of the people that you want to bring into this field. So if we try to build a forecast for 2028, what does the state have to do today so that in 4 or 5 years from now, we'll be in those places that Barak dreams about? I think that what it does today won't impact 2028. I think it has to be in a longer range because the gaps are so huge. Barak related to it, 55% of those who are employed in the high tech are Jews, male Jews, 33% are women, and 1% ultra-Orthodox, 1% women, Arab women. I mean, those are such low figures. So what's in the pipeline, meaning that the potential of what we've used is basically up. So we have to do a few things. The state is supposed to do things it's good at. First of all, in writing up policy through data and figures, statistics, and to look at the labor force in general, to define goals. Certain committees do it, and to set goals for the future, which are very aggressive, to include different populations in the high-tech world with a focus on women, the ultra-Orthodox, and vis-a-vis those goals, to make sure it creates enough incentives and tools and getting rid of barriers so that the other players, it can't just be an event, it's just a government event, so that other players will be able to promote this field as well. I think some of the barriers are not necessarily in terms of budgets or in plans, but maybe, or incentives. Definitely if you want to scale up. Some of the barriers are there with the individual. How many companies are we getting? One friend brings another. People bring people who are similar to us, right? Then things don't change. So also the individual. The individual doesn't have enough connection, networking to enter a specific place. And there are some other gaps, in terms of skills and proficiencies. You can do so many activities. And at the end of the day, if again it's mathematics and English, if not every institution or school teaches teach those subjects, it's difficult. Difficult to bridge the gap of 18 years. So I want to turn to you, Mariam Kabaha. Beyond, again, the Israeli Commission of the Equal Employment Opportunities, you also represent a population. You come from a specific culture, like myself, by the way. And if people ask me as an ultra-Orthodox, so where are you in all your core studies and how do you integrate into society and in the workplaces? So again, I don't come with a list of demands that is so long. I'm saying we just simply have to train, again, children, let them complete their core studies. And I think, we're talking about a sector that's very talented, but beyond that, what about the cultural? Again, demands are not many, because I think most employers again come, try to be very flexible. They understand that I observe the Sabbath, for example. I don't have many demands beyond that, right? Observing my culture and my religion. I think in the Arab sector, I think the characteristic of the culture and the home vis-a-vis this economy, they don't only need the tools, core studies, enter the program and gain certain talents. I think it requires a completely different consciousness or awareness or a perspective. So together with you, you have these two hats, right? I'm trying to understand, if we look forward into the future, are there things that we have to do, that an employer has to do, some things the state has to do in trying to, again, encourage employers to take on certain people, meaning to make you feel that you are as equal as others, that they want you. Thank you for the question. We don't have cultural barriers, in all honesty. It really bugs me when people say this, to keep, talking about culture. We really don't have it. I want to say that straight out. We do not have cultural barriers. Stop it. Don't say that anymore. if a decade ago when I entered the government, they talked about, there's no sort of supply of Arab workers. But, let's take the Technion in Haifa. If in 2016, 20% of the students were Arab students, today, almost 30%. I mean, again, 7, 8 years, again, 30% of the students are Arab students. 66% of them are female Arab students. So, today, 58% of the Arab students who study, again, technological studies are women. So enough with those barriers. And that young woman who has gained a profession and enters the labor market, does she feel she's exactly like a woman from Herzliya? Okay, so let's talk about, let me add another layer, if I may. Okay, so there's no cultural, okay? Let's go beyond, okay? No cultural barriers. Now, the other layers. Students, for those technological students, are not like the other students. They don't have those barriers that everybody's talked about. They don't speak Hebrew. They're not, again, able to work remotely from home. No, these are different types of students of high quality. They talk Hebrew. Their English is excellent. They can work in a hybrid fashion, learn in a hybrid fashion. They're willing to work in a hybrid fashion. Yes, there are other barriers, but it's not the regular barriers that we usually talk of. It's not enough, and you actually mentioned it. You said it really well. Why don't they come? Why don't I see your CVs? It's not enough to say, I want you. You have to do something. You have to do something to show them that you want them. And so long the employers don't say out loud, come and say, we want you, then it's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources to come and invest in a selection program. By the way, my son studies in that course that you open, right, with the Reichman University. And it's a difficult selection process. Why should I invest if at the end of the day nobody really wants me? So if there's no clear statement by the employers, I want you, and I really want to put it on my desk. It's part of my agenda. Take huge, again, companies, for example, that really, again, put this on as part of their agenda. Google, Microsoft, Amdocs, and some other companies as well. I mean, and the results speak for themselves. And you see those other companies where it's not as part of their agenda. It's not important to them. It's not going to come of its own accord. You need, the training has to be there. It has to be, the minute, again, the company places its focus on it, then it happens. But I think the barriers are with the employees at the end of the day. They look for that specific type that we've known, the traditional type, that Jewish male graduate of the technological universities. All the rest is going out of their comfort zone. It requires, of them to be very fair. And sometimes they think they are, they're sort of wavering or relinquishing excellence. And the barriers are there, whether the employers' barriers. Okay, you know what? We had an energetic panel before, so we can also be energetic, right? I want to relate to two things that you said, because you've touched upon two amazing points. We started with, again, this occupational diversity in Google a few years ago. And remember, we came with motivation because, on basis of research, that diverse, again, employees is great. Because when a friend brings a replica, it actually suppresses creativity. I mean, it's great to bring somebody who understands me, but when it comes to creativity, it really, that's what happens if you don't create diverse employees. We need people from different backgrounds because we are building tools for the entire population. If we're all replicas of each other, if we're all uniform, if we all look the same, one friend brings somebody who's exactly like him, I mean, that's no good. I want to go to the corridors. I want to feel the Israeli street, in my company. So it's important to understand that diverse is much within a social impact. It's a creativity impact. Another thing that's important in terms of change is the pace of how we recruit the Arab sector. We approach this problem as we approach every single problem. And a few years ago, we suddenly, the penny dropped. The entire panel, we keep, in the minute that you accept an Arab employee, you bring a candidate, you're actually interviewing him not in his national natural environment, not in his native language, he comes with a certain inferiority complex, right? If I may say, oh, absolutely, I agree. He comes with fears of concern. He doesn't come as if I go into an interview, with this, with a confident chest, standing and tall and straight. So we made a little change. We said that every Arab interviewee, in Google you need 4 interviews. One of the interviewers has to be Arab speaking. One of them has to interview in Arabic. So just to make that change, to create a different sensation. In a moment, Barak, maybe later on, I would like to hear more about this and why you have become a type of a melting pot. Why is it important? What does it stem from? What? Are you a state? You want to promote somebody? What is it? No, it's economical. It's an economical event. This diversity is economical beyond the social story here. But it's known. You've seen it also in research. Diversity is an economical event. It's an economical factor. At the end, you're selling some sort of a product. You want to turn to all kinds of population. So, diversity, it's not, oh, it's nice to have you. It's nice to be diverse because of altruism. No, it's economical. Okay, Eden Shochat is an equal partner of Aleph. He's an entrepreneur of many companies, Facebook, that was sold to Facebook. Today he invests in all sorts of very big companies. And he, again, created this venture capital fund, the Aleph fund. And I want to ask you, Eden, for the need of financing, right, that money, in investment. When we hear the different stories in this room, again, entrepreneurs from all over the world, and they, again, are in keeping with the approach of Barak or Mariam, and they say, I'm willing to invest in this. I'm willing to put my money in something specific. I mean, are we there? How do you see matters? Yes. Investors are not looking for the impact. Okay, I'm the general partner. Okay, my investors are LP. They are limited partners, and as I said, almost $1 billion. Right? Most of the money in Israel come from abroad. About 85 or 90% of the money is from abroad. Our LPs are not looking for diversity. No, that's not what they're interested in. You mean they want talents? They want companies that build value. That's what they want. So if it's a man or women, doesn't make a difference to them. But I do think the objective of 150,000 people, another additional. I mean, it's pretty modest. I mean, if you look at the GBT, it's about 20%, right, of the product. I think there was a huge change in Israel. 10 years ago, you would build a company. You knew that it would move to the USA at some point. They'll build the infrastructure over there. I mean, it doesn't happen anymore. Salesperson, people from products or marketing. I mean, the opportunity is way more than just somebody sitting in front of the screen all day. When you look at startup company, we do have some difficulty. We do have portfolio next Silicon. We have a lot of ultra-orthodox women, but they see it some sort of a mission. That's a problem with startup. When the government always asks me, what can we do? I said, don't destroy this. You just don't interfere. Don't destroy the state. We'll do the rest. I mean, there was this huge but this process of young people, for example, you as like this wonder child, right? Very smart, gifted. You never learned your core basic studies in the regular conventional way. You basically an autodidact. At the age of 17, you had achieved things that people your age are very far from achieving what you did, and you actually went through this process all on your own. So do you think this process can be sort of duplicated, replicated? Somebody who's less gifted, he has a potential, he has a desire. Can you turn such a process into a mass, something that's will really be relevant for many? There were claims about 2800, the intelligence unit, and one friend brings another. But 8200 unit actually got this mission to triple itself, and within this mission, they did an amazing job to locate people in the periphery. And if you look today at elite units in the unit 8200, 49, for example, there is enough diversity of men and women. That's a different question. But they do have some diversity from the periphery. There are talents in the state, and some of them are in the periphery. The question is, how do we train them? And in other populations as well. And number two, how do we locate them? And what do we do? So the state really neglected the educational side of it. Now, what happens is, if you look at the periphery, it's maybe 2%, maybe 5%, it's top 5, 10% that can be located. The problem, what do we do with the rest? So in my track, in Kibbutz Ruchama, Liberia, Nigeria, that was my track. I went back to Israel, so I had nothing to do there. So I learned software programming and understood it's something that I loved. And, that theory of 10,000 hours. Yeah, you suddenly become good in something, right? Just like athletes become good, the more training they, I don't have a chance in being an athlete, but, okay, I did it in a different world. Lots of training creates excellence. But you have to remember that you have to locate and you have to nourish. There's a great program. Maybe you know Code Monkey? It's an amazing program. Kids who are 8, 9, 10 learn how to program. They have no idea that they learn Python, but they learn Python. So the impressive thing is that before the age of 12, girls and boys, it's basically the same thing, right, in Code Monkey. Afterwards, the divergence begins. So if you can locate those people, nurture them, nourish them within those frameworks, I think we're able to be very successful. What is the problem? The problem is, do we have frameworks where we don't give that opportunity to some people? Meaning you don't need English, you just need the desire to sit in front of the screen and to play and to move one monkey from one place to another, and then you're actually a programmer. It's very impressive. Now, if you look at Unit 8200 from the intelligence, I think it was so difficult to bring people, 20 years ago, for example, that they put us again this game called on the internet. It's called Code Guru. It was these robots that fought one another. Nobody, it belonged to them, and it was actually meant for high school students. Those who were very successful with that actually got to 8200. Makes no difference. He was from Afula or from Ra'anana or from Tel Aviv. The thing is, how do we make sure that person succeeds? That is the big question. Okay, that's clear. Barak, I'm getting back to you. Maybe to kind of come full circle, closest discussion. We heard the words melting pot. We heard all sorts of sets and the role of the state. Must the state do something or not? Must it just create policy, give money, give the sectors just that sense that they wanted, that they sought after? Okay, let's just sort of diverge this. You see that margin, the profit margin at the end of the day. You want your Excel sheet in 2023 to show that the high tech is not in a crisis, that there is some sort of a growth. What are you willing to do for that margin, for that profit margin? Are you willing to create a Google branch in Modi'in Illit, that's an ultra-Orthodox city? Probably not, but let me explain why not. What am I willing to do? I'm willing to do so much. I think what I and other big companies are different from what smaller companies are willing to do. When they sort of held at gunpoint, and they just need pure economic impact. Because we as bigger companies, we could actually slow down for a minute. One of the things that took us quite a while to understand. Now these are tiny little things that sometimes impact. We had an index we once sort of evaluated from the minute I opened up. Have an available position, how long does it take to fill that position? And it actually would decrease. We kind of went down by 2 days. We recruited quickly, but then we people applauded, and we said to them, no, we have to do away with this index. Slow down. Today, we will not again fill any position in Google before I am convinced that there was a very full examination of all the different parameters that we want to look at. We examined a lot of male and female candidates. There was at least one candidate from the Arab sector. They were ultra-Orthodox. We would not move forward and not fill that position. By the way, for huge companies to slow down, that's a big thing. And, so many companies don't have this kind of mindset. Yes, a startup can move much more quickly. True. As to the city of Modi'in Illit, the COVID taught me something very important. And unfortunately, the inflation started going up. Not surprising if you understand economics, and the crisis in Ukraine made things more difficult. Definitely, the situation in Israel doesn't help the pace any. However, one of the things that COVID I thought would actually help, again, transitioning to the hybrid model, and most companies adopted this because COVID taught us that we can do a lot through the digital. Also Reichman didn't close its gates during COVID. It taught remotely. And it's still, you mean during a time, you're saying especially in times of crisis or in times of lack of clarity, maybe that's the time to invest even more so in everything that you think, again, you believe in. Yeah, Winston Churchill said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Yes, don't miss out on the opportunity. I believe that hybrid model, I understand, wife, I'm an Arab who lives in the Galilee, not judging anybody, Arab woman or man, who want to stay in their environment, in their village, a very, close-knit family, even us, we like to stay in our environment, in our close surroundings. I really understand the real barrier, why they don't have that sort of courage to deal, because that position is in Tel Aviv. What, I'm going to travel every day, commute to Tel Aviv 5 days a week. I'm a woman, I'm a mother. What about, my family? Suddenly, and I believe that COVID, and I still believe in this, will give us this huge boost. There's a huge difference between thinking, why would I not, open up in Moderator Lead? Because I'll ask you to come to me only 3 days a week. That's a different sacrifice. I think that the digital world and with the boost of technology, I think it will even help us socially. Nobody loves standing, being stuck in jams. Does anybody enjoy the jams? Because if there are, some masochistic people who just like to suffer, raise your hand. But think about that boost that we'll get from this hybrid type of work. I absolutely believe they will get a huge boost forward. So think, if I still live in the geographic periphery and I work in high-tech, the Tel Aviv high-tech as it's called, and I still live in the periphery, and my job is in Tel Aviv, so to speak. It's a win-win situation, right? But we don't want it, again, to be just, those for the periphery or for women, and those regular men have to go to the offices, and those who are far away because they work at home, people don't really notice them. You have to use this very carefully. We don't want those, employees who work far away won't sort of be out of sight. We're all going through an adaptation, absolutely, I can say it. But we are going through this adaptation on our way to this hybrid model. But remember, Eden has a much broader view because he sees the global economy, but there's also that component of Israeli culture. In America and Israeli, they're actually adopting this hybrid model much more than in Israel, because in Israel, we like sort of being close together, and there is a challenge in a hybrid model. So what Barak is describing is a social melting pot. Set aside those figures and to find those talents from Dimona who will come and grow and advance. You're actually describing a melting pot where people come to the same place from many places, get the same chance, same starting point, and they take this, voyage together. And, the dreams are just infinite. But does the state see it as a melting point? Because the state sees the army or other institution. That's the Israeli melting pot. That's where we have to throw in everybody. Everybody has to go through that track. Suddenly we discover, wait, maybe this melting pot track can be in high-tech. So
I'm removing the governmental hat. I'll take it back only for a short while and then take it off again. But a melting pot seems to be, at least to me, it makes me sort of feel a bit inconvenience, unrest. This melting process deletes identity, faces identity, and I don't think that the Israeli society is not in this place now. Quite the contrary, there's a further polarization. So I don't know if we can call this a melting pot or if that is at all the intention. And I put my hat back again. We in the Ministry of Labor talk about integrating populations in the labor market. That's not the idea, the melting pot. What we see is what will happen in Israel in 2060 unless Arab women and male ultra-Orthodox will join the labor market. It means an exceedingly addition to the amount of taxes we pay. It's absolutely necessary, and that's what will happen unless they join us. Now, the ultra-Orthodox men have an interest of joining the labor market. The price of not joining is the price of joining the labor market is not very low, because actually not going to work means getting a lot of money for benefits. So we think that every integration in the labor market is important, and we have no intention of providing a melting pot. It's simply the direction of the state and the amount of taxes our children will pay. Look, I am the commissioner of equal opportunities in the workplace that demands that CEOs do not discriminate against certain populations. I don't want to sue them. I want to encourage them to expand the holes in their sieve and not to allow people to just fall out. As the commissioner, I have a different view of this whole topic. Today, in the state of Israel, we don't have any platform that have us all meet. Neither the education system, not the media, nothing. We just don't meet one another. The only platform that can have us all meet one another, the ultra-Orthodox, the Arabs, Ethiopian Jews, people with disabilities, to work together, to hear one another, to discover that there are a lot more like me than I had previously thought. We don't have to agree on narratives, not at all. But to be blind of religion and color that separate between us all the time, it's the only platform that we have. And I see in it, and perhaps a melting point, pot is a charged word, but definitely it's a place to eliminate or lower elimination and fear. So if I look at those who can lead this agenda forward, it's only the high-tech today, also because much of it comes from international companies that bring this agenda along with them, and also because they can do it, and it's actually done, and it's not because of philanthropic reasons, but because it is healthy for the companies. So if we are aiming at having an egalitarian, inclusive society, I believe that we must start from the labor market, and high-tech companies can serve as an example of how to do it the right way and set an example for everyone else. In other words, to try to skip over all the barriers and all the challenges and to get to the tachlis. Yes, me and you work together, and we have a problem to solve. We're going to have lunch together. I share with you the pictures of my children, and you talk about the challenges your children face. We have so many things in common, but we highlight what distances us from one another. Working together, I believe, is the reality that takes place now in the state of Israel. That includes polarization and mutual incitement on both sides in a very, very harsh way. Doesn't it all take us to become more radical, more fearful of the other? If I planned something, perhaps I will change my course. We in the Commissioner's Office educate and give tools to employers on how to egalitarian to do egalitarian recruiting for their jobs on every level of management. And whenever there is a security challenge, I enter a state of panic. Here it's going to stop. They'll tell us that no progress will take place from now on, but it doesn't happen. I'm glad to say that it doesn't happen. The business sector is far more advanced than the government and the state, and I can only see the employers asking for it. It is not something that is given to them. They have to understand how beneficial it is for them, and if you do it the right way, and these employees are actually going through an onboarding process in the right way, in the optimal way, to keep them in the system and promote them, and not only on the production floor, but rather in core professions that are in line with their talents, it succeeds. We keep going back to the high-tech point, but we have to understand why we keep repeating it and what's the difference in high-tech to other industries. So you have two supermarkets, one close to another. Either a person goes into one or two. The big difference that makes me go to work every day is that you create value out of nothing in high-tech. You take something, you take a vision, you take people, no matter where they are in the world, and you know how to create value out of them. What does it mean? there's no problem in sharing the value of a product, unlike a zero-sum game. And that's why high-tech is interesting, because you create values on an international level, and this is why you see GDP and export. So first of all, you have to understand why this industry is the relevant one we talk about. These are international levels of revenue that just happen to be here in Israel. So historically, it was an arbitrage between Israel and the U.S. An Israeli engineer used to cost 50% of the American, 70%, and then 100. So what do we have in this industry? It doesn't really matter who the person is. If he can deliver, even the language is not even English or Hebrew. It's a strange language. I speak English and Hebrew together, and she always asked me, "Why don't you work in Microsoft?" That was my Jewish mom. I think that what we do have is something that we deplore over many generations and will deplore unless we deal with the short-term and the long-term problems. The short-term, you talked about juniors. There's a major need, despite the crisis and everything. Almost every company in the 60 companies in our portfolio is looking for employees. 8,000 are already being employed, and you can significantly increase this number. So where's the problem? The startup companies don't have the privilege to have somebody experiment on it, whether it's an ultra-Orthodox, an Arab, a woman, or someone who just left the university, be it at Tel Aviv University or the Technion. They're not ready to work. And they're in that short term, and I can't believe that I'm saying it, the government does have a role. How can they offer tax breaks to Checkpoint and Google instead of training their next 300 employees to train the 1,000 new employees, some of whom will go to Checkpoint or Google? That would change altogether the kind of work they do and if they can admit it or not. The advantage of a school, and I was thrown out of high school in the 11th grade, so I don't know if that's my place to talk about that, but it is the place where children are committed to go to. And there's always the question, so what responsibility is there? So beyond the social responsibility to make sure that these kids socialize and talk to one another, there is an academic responsibility. That code monkey that I mentioned earlier, why wouldn't they learn in school, in the cheder? I have a partner. We couldn't be more different. He's got 8 children. I have 3. He's an Orthodox Jew, and I'm a kibbutznik, and we get along. And what do we agree on? So we have to make the most of childhood to teach. So among the ultra-Orthodox, it's cheder, and the core studies in the afternoon. The point is that at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they finish the cheder, and everyone's sending their kids to extracurricular activity. I send my kids to study English and mathematics. But that's perhaps the place of the government. Not everything has to be done and follow the very same program. If you exercise some creativity, and you can find so many solutions both here and both there. That connects to the melting pot. Don't create various options that would scare the other side and make them fearful of losing their identity and fold out. But do give the opportunity. Eden, you keep talking about it doesn't really matter to me who I stand in front of as long as they deliver. And I'm telling you that reality is a lot more challenging. A girl in the periphery, even in central Israel, has to make a lot more of an effort than a boy in order to reach that place in high tech, even if she's as good as him. So the statement, if you're good, it will work for you, by far is more difficult for a girl than for a boy. 8,200 in the military failed to bring enough women. I found this girl who's the best in class, and she opened the door in 8,200, and all men were sitting there, and she froze. And so ultimately, there has to be a very substantial, profound understanding, mostly in the business sector, that it's not good enough to say, if you're good enough, you'll make it. We're open. There's something in the processes, the structure, the inherent processes that we're exposed to as women, even from a very early age, and definitely it splits up and it's channeled to different directions. I have a daughter who's very good in mathematics, and during COVID they get reinforcement in mathematics. Of course, she didn't tell me about it, but I saw it, and I saw that these were 8 children, she, a friend of hers, and 6 boys. And I wondered if she would last if her girl left that class. So besides being blind to what one deserves, saying we're here for you if you're really good. And by the way, not everyone is in the business sector. There's so many obstacles along the way that do not allow people to advance. When there are mediocre women in senior positions, then we'll know that we've succeeded. I don't mind if it's women or men. I'd rather have the best ones in place, but you're absolutely right. But that funnel, by the time it reaches high tech, and this is why my perspective in startups, and I said startups are problematic. We actually raise for 18 months, and that's the runway. Every month that passes by is a month that will never repeat itself. So startups, I don't think that they're a part of the solution. The larger companies can be, more significantly so. Where is the solution or the advantage? And that's in the mobility of management. What do? We monitor the number of women and men, and perhaps you should do it more often. There are populations that are too small to indicate, and as soon as you measure it and place it before our eyes, all of a sudden the ratio changes. So what is required? You need that funnel that reaches all that up to that point to be able to teach and detect. And if we do these 2 things, and educate is a lot more important. Okay, detect, if it's just a needle in a haystack, it's a lot more difficult in a haystack. So it's important, it's impossible to not see the fact that if it's only 1%, then we've done something wrong. If only 1% of the ultra-Orthodox are in high-tech, we screwed up. And why? Because we didn't. The question is, who is we? The state, the entire state. So I'd like to go back to you. Eden is saying to the state, just get out of our way. Don't place obstacles before ourselves. Nature will run its course. Don't limit access to core studies. So that's not be out of the way. Be active. Introduce policy. That's what Tair says. The state has to determine its policy, and that's what it's good at, and that's its place. But I would like to ask you, how do you see the role of the state when you see those governments and other governments, and they have different agendas and different set of priorities? So what role will the state take upon itself that is vision-oriented rather than anything else? I would like to say that we deal with different initiatives, and over time, and I said this earlier, we saw that there is some sort of a common denominators to all success stories that had economic and social impact for the state. Of course, I do get benefits from these processes, and we always saw the equation. And again, I'd like to say that our project with the Reichman University is an outstanding example of it. You need 3 active participants, equal ones, in order to move something forward. You need the business sector. In this case, me, Eden, represent the high-tech sector. I'm troubled by something Eden said about the startups not being the solution, because when I think about the number of active startups in Israel, which is nearly 6,000, we'll understand that they do employ the critical mass of the high-tech employees. This is why we should insist them as being part of the solution. So the business sector, the third sector, and it depends what topic we approach. In this case, take our program for enrichment to teenagers, Hello Tech, that is based on a program that started in Google. Professor Yossi Mattis launched Mind the Gap, which helped girls think about sciences. and you have the Rashi Foundation, us, and the state. So you have all three, and you have to have them. Every time we try to do whatever initiative, if you take violence against women, which we are so proud of the Michal Sela initiative, and the third sector, the business sector, and the governmental sector, without these three, nothing takes air, nothing succeeds, and that's why we're holding this discussion here today. And I truly liked what Eden said, and he gave me ideas. It's not only not to get out of the way, but rather to incentivize. The state has to give a lot more carrots to companies because they're thinking of a melting pot. Neither me nor Eden will think about a melting pot. We'll think about acceleration and an economic boost. I get paid to be this schizophrenic. I can be the CEO of Google and represent Google toward Israel, but very often I work this Israeli hat that represents Israel toward Google. I would like to see a melting pot happening, but this is not our goal. Our goal is to accelerate the high tech. But if something happens along the way, by way of a melting pot, you would not object. Moreover, the goals are different, but ultimately we're talking about the same event. He needs to grow, and he says, I need to bring on board more people. So he needs more people, and if the Jewish male in Tel Aviv are no longer there, and the potential is to find it elsewhere, that's exactly where the state has its interest. I said earlier, we look at the demographics story and what will happen to the state revenues. And if you want to maintain the same level and standard of living in 2060, you must promote women and, Arab women and male ultra-Orthodox to join the labor market. So the goal is, the interest is different, but ultimately it's a very same case. So the state has to identify the market failure for which he cannot do it on his own. So he said, he called that market failure juniors. Let's look at it together. What about the governmental tools can help it? By the way, we looked at graduates of universities and juniors in the general public. We could not detect any problem. Perhaps in the high-tech industry there is. Graduates of colleges, definitely they're out of it. It has to be effective. Learning in Checkpoint means learning with other people that find their positions in different companies, and the network is formed. The reason why Israel on the side of high-tech is where it is, it's because of the network density. This is because we turned into San Francisco, New York, and Tel Aviv, not Berlin and not London. In London, there's the caste system. They won't talk about it explicitly, but it would be unnatural to ask help from anyone else. But in Israel, and that's amazing about the high-tech, because it's not a zero-sum game. Whoever wishes to get help, he can turn to anyone else, and there's coffee for him and shared thinking, and that hour would be devoted to that person and would pay forward, because that person, that would be the expectation of him, to help others. So that's the major advantage of this industry, and it's also one of the advantages if you look at the protest. It is not for no reason that the high-tech sector is a part of the protest. There's the ability to give up locally for longer-term purposes, so that we can bring up our children in this country. And this is why you see the involvement of high-tech. We can afford it. But alongside the involvement of high-tech in this protest, and that's legitimate and it's right, it distances other constituencies that we're talking about here now. It takes a side. It says those who want to go to high-tech from Bnei Brak or Dimona should know that we belong to this milieu. Let's make a distinction here, and it's important. With respect to the protest, if you look at the side of the ultra-Orthodox, there's no question that there is a major challenge with the leadership, and there are basic, fundamental disagreements whether a citizen should be productive and what's the covenant between that citizen and the state. Basically, we should not change the rules of the game. That's the very foundation of the protest, because changing the rules of the game would not allow us to believe believe that ownership, this is where the real problems take place. Everyone's goal is to integrate those populations. The protest is because they would not allow us to do that. If you do not teach core studies, if there are people who can't speak English, if you take someone who sells vacuum cleaners and gets 10,000 shekels salary, all you need is a good English and understanding of the American culture. And we are talking about a salary that is twice or 3 times higher. They work from Israel, the BBRs, etc. So if you don't protest now, there would be no future for these people. You know, somewhere, the protest is fine, it's legitimate, but I don't think that the protest is attempting to say to the ultra-Orthodox, teach English to your children, because if that's what it's aiming at saying, I think it's doing exactly the opposite. First of all, it's a problem. We should talk about it. I mean, we're saying that it has to turn everyone to productive citizen. Unless we do that, nothing will happen. So the state has to give creative tools that go along with a discourse and understanding, because we see the major difference taking place. Barak is describing change and the high-tech and the ultra-Orthodox and the Arabs, and this is very volatile. This is a time of crisis, and where there's a sliding share, and a person who understands in shares thinks that that's the time to invest, and then the owners take a measure that makes potential investors to say, okay, no, we're not coming after all. It can be very risky, and it has to be done very cautiously. So I would leave this to the state. That's what I think, at least, from my perspective. First of all, I totally relate to what Eden said. It's important to explain something about what I said. The subtlety of it. We mobilize these populations and we attract them to us. I can only wish that they would actually, flock to us. Reality, and you also talked about this. Let's set aside women for a minute as a group. Let's talk about the Arab and the ultra-Orthodox populations. The fact that I mostly look at ultra-Orthodox women poses a challenge, but already the supply is curtailed, and about integrating male Arabs is also curtailing and limiting. And the fact that we are offering training in Reichman, one of the things that we never planned to finance, but we found that we must do it. This is a startup course to some of the candidates, and I can tell you that they come from these sectors because they don't have the level of English. We identify their potential, scientific potential, but to integrate in the global high-tech, and that's what Eden talked about, that shift from a startup nation to scale-up nation. If somebody told me 15 years ago there would be international companies that are traded in NASDAQ but work in Israel on a global, like Wix, Lemonade, Fiverr, we would say, you're delirious, no chance. But we are in a different place. And this is why I'm saying that even the communities that we're trying to mobilize should also adapt. And I think that the state has a role as one of the major generators for that. I cannot actually apply my direction on any of those populations. One last sentence. In order for the state to advance those objectives, the decision-making table in the government has to have diverse participants around it. And when there are few women in governmental ministries, there's only one Director General for the Ministry of Advocacy, and there aren't many ultra-Orthodox in the professional or in the public sector. How many ultra-Orthodox sat with us from among the civil servants, let alone the Arab population? That's a part of the story. This policy that must be such that would work for the State of Israel and understand the barriers posed before every group. It's not there. And then to just preach to the high-tech is a bit hypocritical. Ifergan, as of now, or yesterday, it's the former Director General, as of yesterday. Thank you,